Thanks for having me. My name is Richard Cook. There was a little bio on the website. Thank you, Mike, for the helping with that part. I'm a volunteer and as the thing says, one of the founders of Voter Choice Arizona. We are a nonpartisan organization, and our job is to make our government work better at a high level. That's what we're striving for. We're 5 years old. Our primary focus is election reform, but we also led a coalition last year, many groups in the state, to defeat the several legislative ballot proposals that would have harmed the citizenship process, among other things. That was largely successful. Most of those things failed. Our election reform effort has not yielded any results yet, but we have, like I said, been working for 5 years. We have contacted thousands and thousands of people in Arizona, 20,000 plus on our list, and we continue to do that. It's a different political world now. Just in the last year, as you all know, we've changed our short-term goals a bit. We still hope to enact an election reform statewide, but the timeline for that is very uncertain. So meanwhile, we're still just working to build support by educating voters, primarily in sessions like this, out at protests and other public events. And we're also working in several cities, including Tucson, to see what reform might be able to be enacted locally in the near term. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Today, I'm going to go through, it's probably a 10-minute deck on that we've been presenting all this time about basically our proposed, what we think is the best case achievable reform and the benefits that would go along with that. So at a high level, we look at the process with having three parts. If somebody wants to be a candidate, they have to get on the ballot. Each party has a primary election to choose their candidate, and then there's a general election where people do the final step. There's issues with each of these phases. The independent candidates have a higher hurdle. If they want to get on the general election ballot, they require, depends on the office, but could be 3 or 4 or 5 times as many signatures in order to bypass the primary election. That's considered to be unfair by some people. I can see the reason for it, but that is part of our reform, is to improve the situation for independent candidates, as well as for independent, for people who are not registered with one of the major parties. The second stage in the primary election, we believe there are problems here as well. This is where each party gets to choose their candidate for the general election. And the issue is that since most districts are quote unquote safe, that is when one party leads in voter registration in that district by, say, 10 percentage points or more, then the general election is pretty much a given. It's the primary that counts, because that party's candidate is going to win the general election almost always. In this country right now, most state and federal districts are safe. And whether it's gerrymandering or self-selection, geographical continuity, the reasoning really isn't critical. It's just a fact that most districts, 80%, some people say, are safe nationwide. And the same is true in Arizona. You see the numbers here. And the kicker is many voters don't show up for primaries. It's harder for an independent to vote at all. And if you're registered for a primary, many people feel like it's a less important race, or I don't know what the reasons are, but the facts are that many people just don't show up to vote in the primary. So in a crowded race with 4 or 5 or more candidates, and these are plurality winners, so you could get it with 20-some, 30% of the vote and make it to the general election and coast to your victory in your safe district, and maybe have as little as 10% act support from the constituents that you're representing. Then in November, with that primary structure, most often we just have a red candidate and a green candidate. maybe a third person who has no chance. And this for many people, this ends up being a lesser of two evils. If you don't like the candidate that your party nominated, then you're sort of, well, I guess it's better than the other guy. If there's a third choice, they might just be a spoiler candidate, taking votes away from the Republican or the Democrat, and it can result in someone winning with less than 50% of the vote, and someone, theoretically, it could be a candidate who would have lost a runoff election, that they're not popular with the majority, and the spoiler candidate spoiled the race and let a less popular candidate win. So our proposal is given the name Final Five voting. It's a combination of single nonpartisan primary election where everyone votes in the same primary, and 5 candidates advance. The top 5 candidates, hence the name, final 5 candidates advance to a general election that has a large ballot and people have more choices, and then an instant runoff or ranked choice general election where you mark your first, second, third, fourth choices and have a ranked general election. The benefits here are significant. This process has been used in Alaska for several years, so these are not hypothetical. We hope this is going to happen. We've seen all this happen in ranked choice elections in the past, and specifically in Alaska over the last few years. The first one is number one for a reason. It's the biggest one. The winner must have majority support. You can't win a ranked choice election if most voters hate you. And this can be illustrated more if you guys want more information on exactly how that works. I can do it. Number 2 is increased competition. Instead of just 2 to vote for, if you have 5, it's more likely that you'll see somebody on the ballot that you really want to vote for, someone that really is going to do things that you support, and you're happy to go there and vote for them rather than picking somebody that's just a little better than the other one. Number 3 is the system itself punishes negative campaigning, mudslinging, and rewards candidates who can find common ground with the others. We've seen this in Alaska big time, and also in the recent New York City primary where the candidates actually cross-endorse each other, looking for second choice votes, saying, I hope you vote for me, but if you don't vote for me, vote for Joe, because he's doing a lot of the same things that I want to have done. And then Joe would say the same thing. Vote for Richard if you don't like me, or vote for Richard and me second. Number 4, the 2 issues that I illustrated are avoided absolutely. They're eliminated. They do not come into play at all. And then number 5, in places where you do have a runoff, those become unnecessary. You get all the information from the voters on the same ballot. And it's basically, if the votes if nobody wins in the first round with an outright majority, eventually it gets down to 2 candidates. It's exactly like a runoff. It's the favorite of those 2 candidates from all the people who voted that wins the election. A couple more comments about the Alaska experience. Specifically, it's been really remarkable to see what has happened up there, and not just in the election process, but how people behave once they get into office. In most districts, we see this in the U.S. Congress big time. Any legislator who cooperates with the other party or is viewed as being sort of soft on the other party gets punished in the next primary. In Alaska, we've seen bipartisan coalitions working together on things that voters really care about. They know that they need to do things in office that will appeal to all voters, at least most voters, not just the thin slice of their own party who are going to come out for the next part of the primary. That's really, really an important factor and a benefit. Next slide just shows ranked choice has been used in countries all over the world, Ireland, Australia for decades, and this shows where it's used in the U.S. for different types of elections. Maine and Alaska are the only ones that use it statewide. but other states use it for overseas voting and other things. And a lot of localities, even in the states that aren't colored, have localities that are using it. So that's basically that is our pick for Final Five voting. I'll take some questions at the end, but I do want to cover our Tucson effort specifically in just a couple minutes here, and because it's unique. We embarked on a local adoptions effort a few years ago, but it didn't really go anywhere, and Tucson wasn't even on the list because of the way we do local elections here. This slide just describes briefly, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think this illustrates briefly how our local elections work. If you're in the city of Tucson, in the city limits, and you vote for the council and the mayor, the city is divided into wards, and each ward has a primary election. Each party has a primary election in each ward. The seats are staggered so that the whole council is not up for election every time. When I live in Ward 1, I vote in my partisan primary and try to send a Democrat or a Republican to the general election. And then in the general election, the unique part is all the Tucson voters are voting for all the candidates. So if there are 3 seats open, I'll see the red and the blue candidates from the 3 wards that had primaries. I'll see those 6 candidates, and I get 3 votes. And I can vote for 2 candidates in one ward and 1 in another ward. I can vote for a candidate that is not in my ward. I might not be in a ward because my candidate is up next time, but I still get to vote for any of those 6 candidates, 3 of those 6. So that creates a couple of what I might call non-democratic issues. The Democratic Party has the advantage of registration in city, and if you see who's on the council now and has been historically, can infer that when I see that ballot and I'm a Democrat, I'm just voting for the 3 Democrats. And if I'm a Republican, I'm voting for the 3 Republicans. And so the frequent result is the council and the mayor get filled up with Democrats, which maybe that's not bad for your party, but it's possible that you might be in a ward and your candidate doesn't get on the council, or you have no one representing you. And if you are a Republican and they're a minority, but they're not insignificant, to have no one on the council from the Republican Party is probably not fair. So people bring up the idea of proportional representation, maybe having more wards. There's been a lot of ideas floated around. We're working with the Pima County Democratic Party. We've made contact with several members of the city council and the mayor to try to talk through what sort of reform might work for Tucson and be achievable, that would be supported by the parties, be supported by the council, and we would have advocates in positions of power that could tell the people of Tucson that we think this is a good idea and they should vote for it. But we're still trying to compose that. So we're welcoming if somebody wants to work with us on that, or somebody has good ideas. We're in the process of trying to figure out a strategy for Tucson that might improve things for local elections. And lastly, I'm going to leave this up because it's got our web address on it. There's lots more information about the group there, about ranked choice. There's videos that shows how the counting works. That some of them are cute. Some are just if you want to see that. Another thing we can do on request is set up a mock election where people can test it out. Make a vote, mark your choices on the ballot, and then see the results and how the rankings work. We've used things like what's your the best national parks to go to in the West, or restaurants in Tucson. You're going to go to it's a wedding rehearsal dinner and you're all going to go to the same place. I'm going to go to a place that's going to be acceptable to most people. Ranked choice works great for those kinds of choices. So on the website, you can sign up. If you give us your name and email, then you'll be added to our list and you'll find out more about what we're doing locally and statewide. We invite you to share this with your friends if you're interested in volunteering. So there's opportunity for that on the website, as well as, of course, donating. We need money to keep work in progress. And you can also, I'll put my email in the chat. You're welcome to contact me personally about any of these, or if you'd like to discuss further getting involved in some way.
All righty. Richard, why don't you start by sharing your screen and we'll go to questions.
Okay. Take the share down.
I'll start you off with a question. So, so California, so is that now statewide as far as ranked choice voting goes?
No, California has a top 2. They have an open primary and a top 2 general election. So the open primary in California is similar to what I described here that we are advocating, where there's a single ballot. Everybody who's registered to vote gets to pick their candidate, the primary ballot, and then the top 2, in the case of California, the top 2 vote getters in the primary appear on the general election ballot. And it could be, one of the criticisms of that is it could be 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans. So if I'm in a county that is predominantly Democratic, but I'm a Republican, I got nobody in my party to vote for. That is one of the criticisms. The counter is you still get a vote and you get to choose which of those 2, even though they're not your party, your vote counts in the general election, and you can get the more moderate or the more conservative of the Democrats and vote for them in the general election.
Okay, and then as far as Alaska goes, they certainly ranked choice voting is pretty universal, right, up there. And it seems like it takes forever to get results from Alaska.
One of the, that is one of the criticisms, that the ranked choice is complicated. It takes longer to count. There are some technicalities that make it different, but it's not complicated and there's no issues with the counting. And the reasons that election results take time to finalize, in most cases, maybe all cases, the reasons the election results take time to finalize are not because of the ranked choice versus the traditional ballot. There are other things at work, counting mail ballots and certification and other things that make the result publication sometimes take longer than we want.
Yeah.
And I can kind of personal opinion about that. I wish the news wouldn't even cover it until they treat it like a horse race. They say, okay, as the results come in, it's like, okay, this candidate is catching up and this candidate, now they're ahead. When it's not that way, all the ballots are in.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for them to be counted.
Yeah. Let's cover the statistical variance. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. I think Alaska has its unique challenges in its geography, and population is, not necessarily representative of how it would go. But Susie's got her hand up, Joe.
Yeah, she does.
Thanks, Mike. This leads into my question, which is, do you think because both Alaska and Maine are sparsely populated, that's the reason you've got a lot of rural communities, hard to get to places? Do you think that's why ranked choice voting works better there, or is working better there?
No. Maine adopted it in, I think, 2016. And their story is a lot about a group of people who thought it was a great idea and just pushed it. It was a local campaign in that state. And Alaska as well. There was an attorney who, it was his idea. He think, I think we can do this for Alaska. He did all the early advocating. I think he wrote the ballot measure himself. So the reason why it's those two states has a lot to do with individuals who were in those states who really wanted to make it happen and put a lot of energy in it. We put a lot of energy in it in Arizona as well. We had a ballot proposition in 2024, but we did not start collecting signatures. That's another story, but we've rural, urban, demography, red state, blue state, none of that really matters. It's been used in Republican cities, Democratic cities. It's been used in Australia and Ireland, as I mentioned, for decades. That's not a factor.
I think part of the answer, I think, is that both Maine and Alaska are pretty unique in their political culture. They're both kind of hostile to one-party control. They're both very notoriously independent of national trends, and so I think that that's part of the explanation of why they adopted it early and why it's been successful there too.
Yeah, another factor is Maine and Alaska, like Arizona, but unlike most states, have a citizens initiative process.
Yeah,
where you can circulate petitions, you can put something on a statewide ballot, and people can vote on it, and then poof, it's in the Constitution. Most states don't have that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question
Sure.
following on that. Now, does your organization have a proposition for the voters to put this on the ballot and put it in our law and our Constitution?
We have the language. We worked in 2023 to create ballot language. It was a big effort, as you can imagine. It's been through legal review. Prior to launching that effort in 2023, we did the work, and I'm sure we would revisit that. But we basically have the ballot language.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely have the ballot language. It would have been part of our 2024 effort, and something very similar, I think, would happen when we try again.
Yeah, could you share that with us? Could you put a link to the language of that proposition in the chat?
I don't have it. I don't have it at hand, but yeah, I'll take that down as a takeaway.
Great. And
there was a gentleman that ran, I think it was Ward 6, that was done a lot of research. Anybody remember? He was at the
Joe Stinnett?
Yes, that's it. So is he part of your efforts, or?
He supports our effort. I've not talked to him personally, but our director and maybe a couple other people have had conversations with him. He wrote an op-ed in one of the Tucson papers that was very illustrative of the issues that he has with the Tucson elections and why he felt that reform was needed. So yeah, we're talking with him. I think he is a supporter, and if we came up with a strategy for Tucson, I think he would be a decent ally and mouthpiece to advocate for it.
Have you had any office holders that have come out in favor of ranked choice voting?
Lots of former office holders are at the state level.
Yeah.
I don't want to say endorses here because I might get it wrong. There's a lot of former office holders that are supportive, and many have endorsed us formally. Current office holders are a bit reluctant because it puts them sort of on a side or the other. And current office holders have an incentive. I mean, they all got into office in the current system, and most of them have an interest in staying in office. And so they won before, they know how to win. People who are in office have sort of a natural bias against change. And this is why it's so hard in the states that don't have a citizens initiative process. The idea that the legislature would pass election reform that changes the system in such fundamental ways when they're all winning and the two major parties are winning. And right, they've got basically a lock on power for every important seat in the country is either a Democrat or a Republican. They're totally winning the game of back the other party, just try to get an advantage over the other party.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what the results and deficiencies and some of the the things that we're seeing dysfunctional in our politics today stem from the way that we do elections now with first past the post voting? A lot of people don't understand why things are gone awry and why things are as dysfunctional as they are, and don't realize that it's connected to the way that we elect our officials.
Yeah, that is the point that I try to make in the deck. We have a primary election where someone can win with 20-some% of the vote, and that's 20% of the people who vote in the press. Here's your constituents when you're, say, elected to a seat in Congress. Here are the people who are living in your district and vote. A third of them are independent. Another third of them are the other party. And most of them from your party don't vote. So these are the people who vote in the primary that I need to please when I'm in office, not these. So I can win, if I'm in a safe district, I can win the primary by appealing to that thin slice of my party. I can coast to victory in the general election, even though 90% of the people in my district think I'm a piece of crap. Doesn't matter. I'm pleasing that 10% and I get the primary and I win the general. And then when I'm in the general election, I'm thinking about that slice of my party next primary. That's the people that I need to do things in Congress to please. So what am I doing? I back the other party. I amplify crazy stories about what my opponents or potential opponents are doing or might do. I try to instill fear and hate to get the vote from that slice of my party. And you guys are Democrats, so I think you can all nod your head and see that that's what the Republicans are doing very clearly. But the people in office on the Democratic side have the same incentive, and it creates, like Mike said, that is what creates the behavior of people that are in office that's causing what our government does today that so many people feel is dysfunctional and not working. It's not good governance. The government is not paying attention to the things. They're not working on the things that need to be worked on. They're not working on the things that most people care about, not the things that these people care about. That's not happening in our legislature. It's the things that these people care
about. All right, thank you. People, get your hands up. Look up from your keyboards or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Put your hands up, ask your questions, put them in the chat.
There is a question in the chat.
Camera.
Oh, we have a question in the chat there, Mike.
Andrea asked in the chat, city council tends to be Democrat. I say that like it's a bad thing. I apologize for the part if it sounded partisan. I can totally see, and this is our struggle for creating a strategy in Tucson. We don't want to just say, okay, we're the Democratic Party, we got a majority, we're going to slam through a reform that makes us happy and screw the Republicans. Some people might want that, and this is definitely a time when I can see the point of view that it's very important for everyone that things change the way, and I can see people thinking we just got to beat the Republican Party because they're doing bad things. But when I look at it from the American political system and from the way our government should work and our elections should work, we as the Democratic Party could also take the point of view that we have the platform, we have the initiatives and the desires for government and for the city of Tucson that most people are going to support. So we're not afraid to give the Republicans a seat or two on the council, to let their voices be heard, to represent that constituency, because there are Republicans in Tucson. We're not afraid of that. We believe that our policies are going to be more supported by the majority and will win, and the council will vote to do the things that we want done that are going to be good for Tucson.
Okay. I've been trying to figure out the best way to describe the elections in the city. Maybe like a hybrid ward system? And then my question is there are there other cities in the country that have, you know, this system that we have here in Tucson?
There is a term for it, and I'm not pulling it up out of memory right now. And there are other places that do things similarly.
Okay. Okay. Oh, Sherry, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering, when, with the difference when you, how did you pick 5 candidates for from the primary to run in the top 5? I mean, often there aren't, if there's that many candidates running, it becomes quite a zoo.
Yeah, that's a good question. There is some research behind that. I can't describe it, but it's exactly what you say. You don't want 20 candidates because then people would just be overwhelmed. You don't want 2 because there's no reason to rank if there's only 2. So is it 3? Is it 4, 5, 6? The Alaska effort is where I believe the work was done to try to figure out and explain and justify how many candidates should advance. In Alaska, they do 4 because there's a write-in requirement. So they're doing top 4 plus the write-in in Alaska to be 5. But you can think of it as just it's a medium between 2 isn't enough, 8 or 9 or 10 is too many. So we're giving people enough choice, but not so much to be overwhelming. And you don't have to rank all 5. You don't have to research and say, well, boy, is this number 3 or 4, or maybe this is 5. You don't need to wrap yourself around too much the exact choices. And if there's somebody that you really don't prefer, you don't have to rank them at all. If you want to live in the 20th century, it's okay to just rank 1. You can just put 1. If you want to just say this is my candidate and I don't really want to care or worry about the others, you can just fill in 1 bubble.
And the other question is, why did you choose the city? Why not choose the county?
I think the field is open. We narrowed it initially. We limited it to charter cities because there's a clear legal basis. If the city of Tucson votes, change their charter, and do elections in this way, it's pretty much for sure stand up in court. If you're not a charter city, the state legislature or the courts would probably say you can't just go and say you're going to do elections in a different way.
Yeah.
So that limits the field to charter cities from a legal standpoint. So it would be different in that sense.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are legal restrictions on what counties can do as opposed to charter cities. So, you know, there is the possibility of having a charter county in Arizona. Nobody's actually done it, however. But if we were to adopt a charter for the county, then we could choose the voting system for the county as well as the city. So.
All the momentum is in the other direction, though. The state government, and not just in Arizona, all the state governments are trying their best to squash any sort of local authority over lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the other thing that's standing in the way of our efforts in several localities is the prop, I might get the number wrong, Prop 1870 or something. There's a state law that was passed a couple years ago that says any legislator, any state representative or senator can challenge if a city takes action that they believe is unconstitutional. Any state lawmaker can say, I don't think this is right, and they can halt state funds to that city or county until the attorney general makes a judgment about it. So that's really a scary thing for cities to contemplate, doing something that would invoke, it would cause some legislators to throw the flag and say, I don't think you're doing it right. And then they'd live without money for a while until the Attorney General acts.
Yeah, that wasn't a prop. That was just a legislator passed law.
Yeah.
I don't think the voters would endorse.
No, it was a legislative action to make that statute.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a practical question for you. You're familiar with the single shot theory in the Arizona House races, right? Where basically only one candidate is on the ballot where there's two positions available. So how play out the ranked choice voting for that?
I can talk about multi-seat elections like the Arizona House, like the Corporation Commission, like the Tucson City Council. If there were 3 seats in a certain election, you do ranking a little bit different in those situations because you have more than one winner, and so they don't need 50% of the vote. They only need 33 1/3% of the vote to get the seat. The method is called single transferable vote. If you want to look at that, the counting method is called single transferable vote. It's a way to count the ranked ballots so that you get a candidate who gets the seat first, and then to find out who gets the second seat and to find out who gets the third seat.
Wow, good answer.
There's a couple more in the chat, Andrea. The problem with relying on your message being what the voters want is that the opposition wins by lying and creating fear. We can agree with that. That's why authoritarians work so hard to censor opponents, because the answer is more speech and wider participation. Yes. The more speech you have, the more participation, the better your democracy is working.
Do you want to follow up on that, Andrew?
Censorship.
Me?
Yeah, no, I think well said.
Or Richard?
Yeah, he was addressing your question in the chat there. Well, your comment. It didn't have
I'm
a question
sorry.
mark.
Did he answer? I shut this thing off and there's a dead spot where I can't hear anybody.
Yeah, he looked at your question in the chat and read it aloud, and then read my answer to you and pretty much endorsed that. So did you want to follow up on that question, Ro, or that comment?
I think the problem is that for 10 years, we've had people lie. My observation has been of people during my canvassing is they don't vote. You talk about, the percentage of people who do vote. Nobody's stopping anybody else from voting. So go out and vote. You think the other guy is a piece of crap? Go out and vote or run for yourself I don't know why this is going to make people feel like they have more choice. We already have this. All the council members that I have walked for, that once they get on the council members, they all try to represent everybody. That's why it's good. You have a ward voting. If you're too radical for your ward, they're not going to vote for you. Then when you run for the city, you have to appeal to everybody. You have to be the council member, not just for your ward, but for the city. Yep. And it's not hard to inform yourself because we have this now. And you can go, what does this candidate think? If you don't want to call the public library and ask, or the League of Women Voters, Shirley, and ask, how can I find out more about this candidate? It can be done. And people aren't doing it. It's there already. Mm-hmm. Pick it up.
Yeah. One potential silver lining of all of the chaos and things that are happening in the political world now is maybe some people who have been apathetic in the past start to get a little angry and start to exercise their right to vote. We can hope for that.
Yeah, the price is high though. because people are dying.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they
We wouldn't want
if
to
they
plan it
miss-
this way.
if they mess up the healthcare, more people are going to die again.
Well, in
Thank
address to your implied question, there is, does this really address the issue of voter participation? I would remind you that, the Republicans work really, really hard to do things like to prevent people from going to the ballot box, by having higher and higher registration requirements, by gerrymandering the districts. One of the effects of a first past the post system is, you have these single member districts where, you can draw the district to the incumbent, and that's perfectly legal in the United States. And that also suppresses turnout. Gerrymandering is terrible for turnout, because if people feel like they know what the outcome is going to be, regardless of how they vote, why would they vote? And so I think in America, we do not have an ideal system for containing those shenanigans by our elected officials to manipulate their electorate to get the outcomes that they want. And it has a price, and that price is voter apathy and a feeling of helplessness and anger that you can't affect your government. And I think anything that moves us closer to a more representative system, so that people feel their voices are being heard and their votes actually matter, is going to improve our voter participation.
Yeah, that's exactly the answer. If someone tells me that I'm not voting because my vote doesn't matter, and they live in one of those 80% of the districts in the nation where it's pretty safe, they're pretty much right. So we need a better system, a better process, so that more people's vote will actually matter, and then maybe over the long run, participation can increase.
I have a question. I mean, I understand and appreciate the fact that ranked choice voting is a much more effective way to elect our elected officials. But one of the problems I have with locking us into another system is that lock-in effect. I mean, if you change the law and say this is the way that elections should be run, not that way, you've again limited artificially the choice space, the kinds of ways that people can reform and innovate in order to make our electoral system more representative and more fair. Why? Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to see the document that you're actually, proposing the language, because I'd like to see if this also has a kind of lock-in effect. This is not how, this is the old way we do elections. We don't do that anymore. This is now the way that we do elections, as opposed to, empowering choice, empowering, local jurisdictions to come up with their own ways, regardless of whether it's ranked choice voting or some other means of doing it better. Does your proposal include that ability to have more choice in our electoral system based on our local conditions?
You're right that there's a risk of adopting the unknown, and maybe it's worse for all you know. I think the final five pretty assuredly will not have that problem, because it is in use and has been for so long in so many places. We pretty much know how it's going to work. This is not true for the Prop 140 last year, as you and many others pointed out. It was a dreamed up a whole new way of doing things, and we don't really know what the collateral damage might be if we adopt it, and how hard it would be to change our minds going forward.
Very hard to change our minds.
That's a totally valid point. In the case of our reform, we feel like we know exactly how it works. There aren't any unknown pitfalls or anything like that. And it would make, if we passed it statewide, it would apply to all of the state offices, and it would apply to all the cities. So it would, in the sense that you're mentioning, if Flagstaff or some other charter city really likes the way they're or running now, or Tucson, we have our unique system. If people really like the way Tucson works now, it would be sort of changing that from above in a way that would be taking a power away from local jurisdictions.
So the answer is no. It locks us into this new system.
If
I
we
would
pass it
encourage
statewide,
you to consider the possibility that instead of switching us over to a new system, you instead focus your language on local choice, on saying, there are different options, and this legislation empowers local jurisdictions to make their own choices about how they want to run their elections, as long as it meets certain standards.
Actually, now that you're saying that more, I think our prompt did that. I think ours listed the governor, the legislature, the state level offices, Congress would be this method, and that cities and other lower jurisdictions, it had some provision like they would be allowed to do that without further action. They could just do it, but it didn't force it, I think. Yeah, you can read it and see that, but I think that was part of it.
Susie has a question.
Yeah. Do you think we could get that past the legislature?
No.
Thank you, Michael.
No. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, anybody in office has a reason to oppose this kind of change. The Republican Party nationally and in most other places has come out staunchly against ranked choice for the same reason. They're winning. They like the current system.
Not only that, but they have tried to pass laws to outlaw any kind of electoral reform. Yeah.
Yes. They have a large incentive to oppose any reform that would loosen their grip on power. And we've also seen the Democratic Party do similar things. There was an effort in Nevada last year to do this. The Democratic Party came out against it because they have power in Nevada now.
Yeah. I gotta say that this is not a complete fire on both houses, because Democrats in general, as we demonstrate here by talking about it, are more open to it because we are the party of the people, and so we figured that the more participation we have, the broader participation we have, the better we're going to do electorally, whereas the Republicans assume exactly the opposite and work toward exactly the opposite.
That is definitely the truth.
Yeah, so I would caution you, Richard, in saying fly on both your houses, because one house is actually leery but open to it, as opposed to the other one is already working to try and head you off at the pass legally and prevent any kind of reform.
Yep. Okay, Sherry.
Part of what I have to do as a nonpartisan is call out the examples where it's not exclusively one party that's always doing good or bad.
Sure, but it is mostly.
Can't argue with it.
Okay, so Sherry, did you mute yourself?
Yeah, you're on mute.
Given that the turnouts for primaries and for elections is so low as it is, how are we going to get people to vote with a more complex system? I mean, we have trouble with people understanding that if they're an independent, they can vote in the primaries by asking for a ballot of one party or another, and people just don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a real complexity that has impact. The process for independents to vote in the primary is a complexity with real impact. The complexity of ranked choice is not impactful. People can say, this is my favorite, this is my second favorite. We do it all the time in real life. And there's a lot of data out there that shows people don't get confused. There's not more bad ballots in a ranked choice election than there are in a regular traditional election. They do surveys, people coming out of their first RCV election, and they say, how did it go? People are happy. After the fact, they say it was simple. It's not complex in a way that matters to the voter. You've got a paper in your hand and you mark your favorite and your second favorite.
Yeah, I think generally the reason why people don't vote isn't the complexity of our electoral system. Our electoral system is actually, almost 300 years old and is fairly simple now. So I don't think it's the complexity of voting that actually turns people off. It's the ineffectuality voting that turns people off.
Richard,
And
when
having
you
somebody
look,
that you really want to vote for.
Yeah.
Like when I go to when I see the election and I know the ballot is going to contain person A that I hate and person B that I really think is kind of clueless or whatever, that voting is not fun. I want to vote. I want to go in the ballot and see somebody that I really like.
okay, Richard, I've got one for you. So you look at Hawaii, you look at California, you look at Alaska, you look at Maine. How does when ranked choice voting is actually implemented, how does that affect the political parties?
The parties, the major effect on the party is, and one of the oppositions from strong partisan people is the idea that we don't get to pick our candidate anymore. That the traditional partisan primary where all the Democrats get in a room and they pick their best candidate and the Republicans, they pick their best candidate, that system changes fundamentally when you just have one nonpartisan primary with everybody voting. And this is a reason why the parties don't, in many states, they have a totally closed primary. You cannot vote if you're not registered with that party. We only want our party members voting to choose our candidate. So it's fundamentally changing that sort of historical process of partisan politics with a primary and a general election for the parties, or the general elections today are basically party versus party. And that's why in the state districts, it's always the red candidate in the red district and the blue candidate in the blue district. It's a fundamental change to that sort of mindset. The parties are still, it doesn't eliminate parties. You would still see the party, the candidate that has a party would show the D or the R or the G or the I on the ballot. So you know who you're voting for. The parties are still relevant and probably still predominant in the whole system, in the process. They don't lose their importance. What they lose is the stranglehold. They lose their grip on those state districts.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that also changes dynamically in a multi-choice election like ranked choice voting, as opposed to a single choice like in a primary system, is you see less inter-party conflict. You see more pairing up and like being buddy and like Mandami and the guy who was a controller in New York City were like endorsing each other and cutting ads together, because they weren't hostile to each other. They had differences and they talked about those differences, but they didn't attack each other. In fact, they supported each other. And so I think that's something also that changes dynamically as a result of a election system like this.
Yeah, that is so significant. And the guy that introduced me to RCV had a story about that, where the election process brings the candidate. And if you have an election process that encourages people to find common ground, to relate to each other like people, to do all those behaviors, then guess what? They get elected. People who know how to do that get elected when stuff gets done.
Yeah. Okay, Francesca, you had a question?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you had your hand up?
Oh, it was an error, but I was just, I was just curious. We have the Electoral College, which is not a popular vote. How does it work in countries like Ireland? Just curious.
I don't think there's anywhere else that has anything like our Electoral College.
Oh, no, I know. No, how would it work? How does it work in the countries that have it?
Most
just popular vote.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
It's the ranked choice system. Just think of a general election where you have in many of these places multiple parties, maybe 5 or 6 or more parties. There's some number of candidates on the ballot, and they rank the candidate, and it forces a majority winner in a way that almost a majority of the people may not have got their best candidate in office, but the majority of people will be satisfied with the winner.
Yeah. I think Francesca brings up a good point, because when did Ireland actually adopt its ranked choice voting system? Wasn't it in the wake of sectarian violence there in the 60s and 70s?
Interesting.
I thought it was older than that, but I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we're driven to the point that civil conflict is certainly a possibility, and the fact that it's working in a country that was so deeply divided along sectarian lines to the point of violence in the recent past is a good testimony as to maybe its effectiveness in reducing community conflict and reducing the move to actual violence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this talks about this is an answer to the complexity question. Do we think the Irish are smarter than we are? That they can actually do this?
On average,
I've got
maybe.
some Irish relatives, and they don't even understand the question. When I say, well, what about what do you think about your voting system? And they say, what do you mean? They don't give it a second thought. That's how they do it.
All right, I see we're up against the 1 o'clock hour. We seem to be out of questions, so I think it's time for us to sign off, Joe.
Let's have a nice big round of applause for Richard. You batted all the questions out of the park, and you gave us a lot of food for thought. And I love the question about Ireland, and talk about macro look at things. I think that's wonderful. So keep up the good work. I'm sure we'll hear more as things happen down the road.